Joining us. We'll give people a minute to join the meeting, but in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. What was your first job? I don't know, Bradley, what a tunnel rat is. I feel like we need more explanation for that. Getting lots of great answers in here. Oh, I see. So they needed a small person to run wires under the buildings. Very interesting. Love hearing all of these. Yeah, I was also a lifeguard. That was my first job, Laguna Beach. Very fun. Well, thank you again for joining us this finally snowy day. We got a little bit of snow this last couple of days, which we are appreciating. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to sharing the information that we have with you today. So, Emily, if you can switch to our first slide, our quote today is from Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women. She said, "I am not afraid of storms, for I am learning how to sail my ship." So appreciating those times when we have some difficult things that help us to learn how to navigate through things. Um, we are in the midst of our legislative session. We've had lots of interesting legislation put forward. We'll get to that in just a second. I think our next slide, Emily, is just an update of our board meetings. So earlier this month in February, there was just a couple of things that our board met on, nothing huge, but as far as assessment, um, they did discuss the process for standards revision and talk through that timeline and how that impacts assessment. There weren't necessarily specific decisions made, but there were discussions talked about what that looks like. There's also some bills that are kind of looking at revising some or a lot of standards. So we're watching things, but that revision process is being discussed both by our state board as well as the legislature. And additionally, the board ended up taking a position of support on several proposed education bills. You can find that in our legislative tracker. It's linked on the next slide. So we'll talk about that in just a second. Coming up in March, there's only one big thing that it's not big, but one assessment related topic on our March board meeting. The March board meeting is a week later than it usually is because it's usually the first Thursday and Friday of the month. In March, they push that back a week to let the session end, and then they hold their board meeting after the session ends. So it's coming up on March 12th and 13th. But the one topic for assessment that will be discussed is R277604, which is the rule around private school, homeschool, BIE students, or students that participate in a scholarship like UFA. It's the rule around allowing those students to participate in assessments. Um, Remember, with that rule, you all have the LEAs are responsible to have a plan for whether that's charging students or how you enroll students or how they can get to your schools to be able to participate in assessments. So that's that rule. The reason why this rule is coming up is just because it's a 5-year review. It hadn't been it was up for review. When they discussed it in the February committee meeting, there was no discussion. It moved forward as is. So there's no changes to the rule. It's just a chance to revisit and review that rule. So in committee, again, there were no discussions. So I don't anticipate there being any continued discussions or changes to that rule, but just a heads up that that's going to be discussed in March. And then our next slide talks a little bit about the legislative session. Again, we're in the middle. Oh, no, sorry, there's procurement before that. That's right. Thanks. And you can go to the next slide. I just forgot I had another slide in there. So procurement discussions. We have a couple of contracts that are ending in June, and our team is busy writing procurement for RFPs for the following assessments. The first one is our elementary math benchmark. Our current contract is with Acadience Math. That contract ends on June 30th. That contract, we are asking for additional funds. Right now, we only have enough money to pay for $1.50 per student in K3 on our early benchmark math assessment. We've asked for some more money. It's looking like right now it's in the Kobe, but we haven't heard support or not for that. So we're holding off on posting an RFP until the end of the session, so we know if we have additional funds that we are able to use when we're going out for a contract. But our current contract with Acadians Math ends June 30th. So we will for sure have a new contract, whether that's a new assessment, a new vendor, or the same assessment and same vendor we will be determined after we go through that procurement. Our plan right now is if there is a new assessment, like if we go through the competitive bid process and we have a new vendor selected for the elementary benchmark assessment, we're locking down and scheduling some dates for the summer to provide training. Likely that training will be for a train the trainer type model to make sure we have something ready to go before the fall with a new vendor. So it's a really small timeline, but we have to know how much money we have before we can post that contract. So we'll keep you posted as soon as we know more on that. When the session ends in March, we'll let you know if we received additional funding or not and what the plan is. But our current contract does end this June, so we're watching that. Additionally, we have our contract with Utah Compose Measurement Incorporated as our vendor for that. That contract ends on the 30th. We are moving forward with a new RFP for that online formative writing tool. We'll keep you posted as soon as that contract, or excuse me, as soon as that procurement process ends and we have a vendor selected. But again, that contract, the current contract ends this June. And then finally, we actually have a procurement posted currently for an online college readiness tool. Currently, that contract is with Schmoop, and that contract ends again June 30th. So that procurement is actually posted now, and we're moving through the process of selecting a vendor for that online college readiness tool. Any questions on any of the procurements? Okay, and if things come up, feel free to come off your mute or to put something in the chat. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Em. And then I think this is the slide that talks about the legislation tracker. So we have some information on the USBE website. You can click that first link. It takes you to our legislation page that gives you information about when all the meetings are and helps to direct you to what's happening with legislation. Additionally, the USBE has a bill tracker, so you can click on that link. It's a PDF, and so it's updated fairly regularly. I was checking on a couple of bills that had some changes this last week or week and a half. Those hadn't been updated on that tracker yet, but that is all of the education bills that USBE is tracking. On that tracker, you can also note whether the board has taken a position on that bill or not, whether they're supporting it or whether they have not taken a position. So you can follow along on that tracker for any of the bills that are being discussed currently in the session. There's a record number of bills again this year. Last year was a record number, and we've beat that bill record number from last year already. So lots and lots of movement with things going on the Hill. Okay. And if there are other questions, go ahead and throw those in the chat or come off of mute. Happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Just got some quick updates for everyone. Next slide talks about testing breach protocols. We've been working internally to develop this document. There's a link to it here if you want to check it out and attach any feedback to it. Everyone who goes to the document should have the ability to leave a comment if you want. Remember, this is not specifically for you as an individual, but for the state overall. We're not looking to confine this to what you might want to do within your own LEA. But knowing that any types of breaches that occur, the first line of defense is actually your LEA. The policy and the code is very clear that the responsibility for anything that happens on the test really falls down to you guys as the assessment director, having to start any type of investigation and running that investigation. And so the breach could be something as simple as a kid cheated on the test to something more severe where teachers are taking pictures of things and doing other things improperly. So this is some information that we've compiled based on the code and the policy. And it says invalid leak. I'll fix that in a minute, Chrissy, I promise. but it's a chance for you guys to see what we've compiled based on information from experts in assessment and breach protocols, including if we detect a breach at USBE, what steps we'll take to notify you so that we'll make sure that you're involved from the very beginning. Next slide has a thing that we're going to see even more often. It's this is actually we have we're up and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but we've been updating our testing ethics training because we had a request from you guys to actually have that as a Canvas course. And this is just a simple little flow chart if there's a violation of any kind, um, and how that gets reported. Um, so it really, the big review happens at your level as the LEA assessment director. And if there's no violation, there's nothing to do. And then where you go from there depends on, what the violation was. If it was a student cheating, then it could be just something as simple as invalidating the test. Or if it's something an employee did, it could be, well, there's an LEA consequence to that in terms of, you did something wrong and shaking your finger at them to other types of sanctions you might do since they're your employee. Something more severe, you might end up wanting to report it to UPAC as a violation and then have them do a review. I really think that's a really good avenue to take if you're not sure. If you're like, I don't know if this is severe enough, send it to them. Get an independent review, get independent eyes to look on it and get their feedback on that. It could just having someone that's separated from that could be really helpful. But this is one of the images that we created for the new ethics training that's coming out. In our next slide, let's talk about the ethics training that's coming out. It's a Canvas course. It's been under review. We reviewed it internally, and we have a group of yourselves who are reviewing that and giving us feedback that is due, if I remember right, by tomorrow. And what we're hoping to do is take that information from some of your colleagues. Jeff, thank you. I think it was really good too. And we're going to take that information and that feedback and improve it again based on that feedback. And we're hopefully going to be able to try to show that to you in April, May at the latest. And we're hoping to have it up and running as a Canvas course in June. And so that way, you instead of having, especially if you're a remote school, instead of having to gather all your teachers together to try to do this all together, then you can take and just have your teachers work on it individually. They can work through it as a Canvas course, and at the end, they get to print out a certificate that shows they've completed the course for that year, and they could send you a copy of that certificate as a PDF, or hand a copy to the principal and say, "Here, this proves I've completed the training," and you can document it that way. And so we have still online the PDF training that's available for use, and after talking about that internally, like this is something you still want to have available if we're moving to the Canvas course. We'll be looking very closely at how much use the Canvas course actually gets over the next couple of years. But if you'd like to still keep that PDF that we post of where you can sit down with all the teachers and run through all those slides, it's available. We can still keep it up if that's something that is going to be actually be used. And so if it's going to be used, just answer that short survey about it. And we'd love to get your information on that just because we love your feedback. And I suspect that there's some people that might still want to use it. I've really been enjoying helping build that Canvas course. And so I've been learning a lot about Canvas. It's been new for me since I left the classroom right as Canvas was coming out. Also on our next slide, there's some information for you. We've worked with ACT because we get a lot of questions about what's happening with ACT. What's the difference between the national test versus the state test? What's changing? This is a one-page handout you can give to administrators, to teachers, to parents, pretty much anyone. It just is the nuts and bolts of these are the changes happening with the new enhanced ACT that's being proctored this year on our Utah test and going forward with ACT. And so we've got this on our website. It's available for you to use, and it should work out pretty well. We think it's pretty good nuts and bolts. Here's the information that people really need to know. It answers most of the questions that we get. The next slide.
So sorry, Scott, one
Yep.
thing on that. Can we maybe just highlight for our 80s a reminder again about the changes with ACT and our plans with accountability and those not really changing.
Yeah, the big change on ACT is ACT has moved the science test on their national test to an optional test. They don't have to get it. It's not being used in the composite score anymore. So going forward, the English score, the math score, and the reading score, I think I got those right, are going to be the ones that are used as their composite score. And the science score no longer is. If students take the science score, which on the Utah test in contract, um, we're still giving the science test. It's on the contract for our test. Um, we're still going to be doing that science test. And because the kids get the science test, they also get a STEM score because they'll combine the science and the math score for a STEM score. The feedback that we've had overwhelmingly from you, from our technical advisors, from our policy advisors, they like to see that science score kept. The contract after next year goes up for renewal, and that becomes a decision above our pay grade anyway, whether or not we keep the science test as part of the contract. But the feedback we've gotten overwhelmingly field is going to want to keep the science test. So the composite score is going to change. And one of the things that's been a little disconcerting has been feedback from ACT saying to expect up to a 2-point drop on average of ACT composite scores. And so that's something that has us concerned. We're looking closely at like last year's data. What does that look like if we take out the science score? And it really depends on, it's really going to impact the individual student, we think, more heavily than anything else. Because if you're a student, where science is your best course, taking away that high score is going to drop your composite score. If you're a student where English or math is your higher score, then it could be beneficial not to have the science one. And so we've seen data that shows that it really depends on the individual student where their strengths lie. ACT has been working with the universities on this also in terms of where they use the ACT for things like scholarships or admissions for some. And we still haven't heard a lot of information on that end because we get questions there too. And we're like, we don't know yet. But that's been the big changes. They just removed the science score and it's now optional. So anyway, we're happy to get any questions you have on that. ACT's going to be coming out with more detailed information that we will pass along to you. We've been shared with some of that information that's been embargoed yet. They're still essentially waiting to see what happens with this year's data and how that pans out using the new system. So once we get those updated bits of information from ACT, we'll make sure we pass those on to you. So any other questions? Because I think that's my last slide. Yeah. No, that's not. I got one more. Sorry. I'm on a different slide on my screen. For what people on the Wasatch Front area, we send out a notice to everyone that we're coming looking for assessment observations. Please sign up for that by next Thursday of next week. We'd love to be able to come out and visit your schools, but remember, there's no guarantee of a visit. We're going to try to fit in as many as we can, but it's always during the testing window. We know you're busy. We're also busy. And so we're going to try to fit as many as we can. One thing is we've had some nervousness about visits. We always do. Well, they're coming in to check on us, and this is going to be about compliance, and heads are going to roll. And no, this is about us coming in and seeing actual assessment happening to give your schools feedback on the assessment, and more importantly, for us to receive information about how the schools feel about the feedback. And so we're going to be sending those schools that are selected, we'll send out survey information for your teachers, for your administrators, and for your students to give us information on things about the test and things that we could possibly do to improve the test. I will say last year we had a fantastic visit of one of the high schools where they were doing the Utah Aspire Plus test at the time. And we got to meet with essentially the student body officers, the kids at the school, and they had all kinds of questions. And it was really nice to be there to ask. And one of the things had to do with why they do ACT on a different day than Utah Aspire Plus, or why they do, why they have everyone grouped in certain ways and why they do it. And they really want to be able to have it different. And when their administrator said, well, we do it because of this reason, the kid that asked the question was like, oh, then don't change it. It's fine the way it is. And so just being able to give that clarity to the kids was really interesting to see. Once they understood the reason why the school was testing the way it was, the kids were like, oh, that makes perfect sense. We didn't know that. And it just eliminated that concern amazingly. Alex, UA Plus is not being observed because it's now the last year it's being done. Um, there really wasn't any reason to actually observe Utah Aspire Plus, and so we're just going to be observing DLM and Rise right now. And I know on the survey we send out, it has specific things we're looking for. If you're not doing any of those things, we'd still love to come and visit and see just regular testing. That's okay too. And so it doesn't have to be, well, we don't have any kid using the Braille machine. Fantastic. We still like to see regular testing too, and love to get the feedback. So, excuse me. So that's it. That's all I got right now. If there's no other questions, we'll go on to our next person, which I think is Maureen.
Yep, that's me. All right, so we are rapidly approaching the spring summative window for Utah Aspire Plus, Rise. We've got DLM coming up. We've got Acadian's end of year. So we are about to get very busy. Next slide. So here are all of my reminders for you guys. Remember, if it takes 24 to 48 hours for a student's record to show up in an assessment platform if they are new. If anything changes on a student record, it will drop them from rostering for probably a day or so, and then they will come right back. These include course changes. If you have a term change, that's going to drop everybody. Scram record changes, date of birth changes, name changes, any of those things can drop a student off of rostering. If you have a teacher that doesn't have rosters, say in Tide, and because they haven't had a Cactus ID attached to their user account, once you add that Cactus ID to your user account, you have to wait 24 hours for the teacher and the students to be connected together on a roster. Also, UTREX errors. Students with fatal UTREX errors do not roster for assessment. So be on the lookout for those. Next slide. All right, so if you have a student that isn't showing up in one of these assessments, here's things to look for. For Rise and Acadians, our course-based assessments, you want to check out their core codes. Make sure a student is enrolled in a class with a rostering core code. You want to make sure they're actively enrolled in a course. Look at those exit dates, make sure they are in there. Obviously, if you've had change of term, they're going to drop off for a day or so. You want to look at if you've changed a student's schedule, that can get them dropped off for a day or two. And also you want to check that 1% flag. If a student is marked as 1%, they are going to roster for DLM assessment. They are not going to show up for Utah Aspire Plus or Rise. They will show up for Acadians. For Utah Aspire Plus, just our grade-based assessment, you want to make sure they're actively enrolled in a school. They have reached their first day of school. You want to make sure they aren't enrolled in more than one school. And also that 1% flag. Next slide. Okay, tiebreakers. So if we have a student that's enrolled in more than one school for Utah Aspire Plus, these are the tiebreakers we used. Also, we use these tiebreakers for ACT as well. The school of record, then their membership days, then their entry dates. Then we check the brick and mortar. We choose a higher grade over a lower grade if you have a student that's enrolled in 9th grade at one school and 10th grade at another school. It happens more than you imagine. And then we go finally to lowest org source ID. Our org source ID is just a district number and with the school number added on. Pretty straightforward. For our course-based assessments, we look for those core codes. We have a ranked priority of core codes, and then we look at entry date, course period, and course section ID. Oftentimes, we might think of these course-based tiebreakers for in the scenario where a student is enrolled in more than one school. However, we also use these tiebreakers for students who are enrolled only in one school. Next slide. We have a couple scenarios here for a student that's only enrolled in one school. Ooh, we have 3D on my top photo. So this scenario would be, you're wondering, the student is rostering with their PE teacher in Acadians. Why is that happening? If you look at their class schedule here, you can see that they've assigned the same core code to all of the students' classes. Their PE class has the same core code, art, their homeroom, their music, their citizenship class, all the same core code. So our next thing we look at would be their course entry date. And you can see that PE class, they entered it a little later than their other classes. So this student is going to roster with their PE teacher. They're a kindergartner, so in Acadians, you're going to see this student with their PE teacher. In this case, there are core codes that can be used for elementary music, elementary PE, elementary art. I think best practice would be to assign those core codes to these classes. Our next student just has 3 fifth grade classes, all with the same core code. They all have the same entry date, so we're going to look at lowest course period for this student. They have one that is an admin period. They have first period, third period. That middle class that's first period, that one's going to win the tiebreaker. And I see these scenarios all the time. So if you happen to see a student that's in a class you aren't expecting them rostering, this is definitely a thing to look at. Next slide. All right, duly enrolled students. All right, so we all know students enrolled in more than one school can take RISE and Utah Aspire Plus at any location. They just need their SSID and to be in a test session or have a test code, and they can test. If you have been approached by a student and then they tell you they would like to test at your school, you can do it. Just please notify the other LEA that is responsible for that student that you are testing them. We don't want students to be tested twice. That rostering school is responsible for ensuring the student is assessed. So they'll want to know that you are assessing their student. Results can only be seen by the school they're rostering with. You would have to share if the other school wanted to know what they were. And my picture is covering this, but it says, the decision to test students that are not rostered with you is at the discretion of your LEA. If another LEA requests that you test their student, you may decline that request. However, if you have room for a couple of students to come over to one of your test sessions and test, and you're their neighborhood school, I think that is a service you can extend to them. Next slide. All right, private homeschool UFA students. Sid mentioned that we are looking over this rule, but so far everything is as it has been. You are required to provide an opportunity for these students to participate in assessments if they request it of you. You'll need to enroll them in your LEA with just the barest of information. They need to be enrolled in a school. They need an SSID. And for our course-based assessments, they'll need to be in a course with the teacher Cactus ID assigned to it. It can be an administrator's Cactus ID, just any Cactus ID. For this year, there is a new school number for UFA students. We treated them as private students last year, but they have their own school number, 993 this year, so they'll need to be enrolled there. We have validations that check students in school 993 to make sure they aren't enrolled other places. So we don't want to jeopardize their scholarship funds by putting them anywhere else. So please make sure UFA students are in 993. All right, once you get results for these private homeschool UFA students, you really need to be careful who you share the results with. You want to share them with just the student, their parents, Just the barest of people you want to share these results with. Also, this special rostering process is only needed for students who are not currently enrolled at any public school. Please, before you go through this whole process, just check in Data Gateway and make sure that student isn't anywhere else. If that student is anywhere else in the current school year in Data Gateway, you don't have to go through this process. You can just treat them as a dually enrolled student and test them that way. Next slide. Oh, that's it for me. So if there are no questions, obviously you can, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'm here for you. Happy to help.
Okay, WIDA, happy WIDA testing. We are over halfway through, so thank you all for doing an amazing job. We have really good high completion rates happening in the state of Utah, so thank you for all of your hard work. Of course, always, please reach out to myself or Tracy if you guys have any questions at all. All right, so getting into it. There are a couple more trainings still available to help wrap up access testing. So there are free webinars that you can access through your WIDA Secure Portal account. And so there's a webinar that can walk you through the data validation process. Just remember that DRC will also send you instructions on how to go through that process, and I will also send out instructions as well, just in case you missed that or you did not receive that from DRC. And then there will be another free webinar on scores and reports. So how to access those, how to take a look at those, what do they mean? And then coming in May, this is far ahead, but coming in May, something to just consider. For next year, if you want to get a jump on things, especially considering screening can start in the summer, just the technical enhancements for next year's platforms and systems and everything. So if your tech people need something to do over the summer, there you go. All right, next. So, some of you, like I said, we've had some really great completion rates already across the state. But some of you, as you know, got some firm but friendly reminders. I sent out a batch of firm but friendly reminders to complete your access testing. Last week, those email reminders did not require a response. The one that did go out this Tuesday, which I'll say, holy cow, within a week, the number changed a lot. So really awesome. But the second reminder that was sent out this morning, not this morning, the morning of the 17th, so just this past Tuesday, that one does require a response. And this is because the reason why these are sent out is to make sure that we do have ongoing communication. Everyone's on the same page with what we're seeing for completion, but really to reinforce the idea of this test is so heavily tied to a student's civil rights. We have to make sure that we are giving students ample opportunity to test. So again, if you are waiting till the last minute to test, are you really providing the opportunity for them to have access to testing? If you're waiting and the student happens to be sick, where is their opportunity to then make it up? Do they have just one shot at making it up? And is that really fair access to their right to testing? I know every student wants that right to test, best right ever. But again, we have to ensure that we are doing what we can to make sure they have every opportunity. Some people have said, hey, we would rather wait till the very end so the students can learn as much as possible and have even more time to prove their proficiency. WIDA has actually done extensive studies and research on this, and in their findings, they have found that waiting till the end of the testing window does nothing to improve student scores. There has been no findings to suggest this is a good practice. So if you've been thinking that's why you want to wait, honestly, it doesn't make a difference. Like waiting a couple weeks in how students score, but also it could be starting to veer into that murky area of are we really giving opportunities? So, and also, again, I think what we see on our end and what you're seeing on your end, it opens up communication. It allows us to help be a thought partner in troubleshooting, but just again, making sure we're all on the same page. So, if you have not had a chance to reply to that email, please make sure that you do so we know that there is a plan in place that is allowing students that opportunity. All right. Well, we tried to fix this slide, but there you go. Um, Again, the bubble reminder. We've actually already had instances of this cropping up this year. Again, I mean, I know, listen, this is like one of those moments when it's like, you're old when you know what a scantron is at this point and what bubbling means. So our younger generation educators might need a quick bubble lesson. So make sure that they are actually accurately bubbling things. The machines can't read it, okay, if it's not bubbled correctly. The most common thing I'm actually seeing getting reported from DRC is people putting check marks or just a dash through it. Um, that's not bubbling. So just remind people it's a circle for a reason. It's not a check mark box or anything like that. So help me help you save some money because this is a costly mistake. Get that message out. Um, and then you can still order test materials, okay? Remember that as far as testing, because I have had emails coming in saying, hey, we just got a new student. We screen the student, they qualify for services. And so basically the rule is if the student comes within the last 10 school days of access testing for you, you have those full 10 school days to get the kiddo screened. So the student wouldn't have to take access if they enroll during the last 10 school days of access. Okay. But if they come 11 school days during access testing left, then you would need to make efforts to get them to take access. I know that that is a hard ask and that's like back-to-back testing, but if you do have any questions or anything like that, just let me know because those incidents do happen. March 3rd, Christy, no, because you technically have 10 school days to screen the student. Okay. All right. Next. Um, Continuing on, we have till the 6th to get our students tested, and the deadline then to get materials postmarked back to DRC for scoring is the 16th. You can send things back early and you can send things back in different shipments. So I highly, highly encourage that any paper materials that need to be scored, those actually be sent back earlier so scoring can already start and that can help with any delays in scoring. Always remember that, hey, weather is wonky. I know that, so DRC is located in Minnesota, and I know yesterday they had some gnarly storms that way that shut down a ton. So obviously, always consider just because, it might be beautiful here, which guess what? Winter just arrived finally, doesn't mean that getting things shipped across the country is always going to be super smooth. So the earlier you can send things back, the better to more guarantee that things won't be delayed. Okay. And then, of course, as we get closer to that data validation, just expect more communication and directions. All right. Um, I will say for our next slide, Tracy and I have been out and about across the Wasatch Front. We have been visiting numerous LEAs and first, biggest thanks. It has been such a pleasure and a joy to go out to the schools and to see things happening. One thing to always remember is that as we are coming to your schools to do observations, please remember these observations, they are not monitoring, they're not compliance, they're not an audit. This is you helping us meet U.S. Department of Education peer review requirements. So you are doing us a huge favor, but also, again, we want to be out in the schools. We want to see what's happening. It helps us better support you. And doing these observations, it allows us to have a second set of eyes on things. So maybe there were some pain points or challenges that you didn't even know existed, and we can help you smooth those things out. Or if there are technical issues, we're there with you to help you right then and there. And also, though, just having the opportunity for you to provide feedback to us so we know how to better support you. It's our job to support you all, and we want to. And thank you, Michelle. We loved going to your LEA. It was fabulous. Couple of things though that have come up in observations and questions in the debrief that we've gotten. I wanted to kind of go over. So we're going to have a little two-slide WIDA access. Did you know? I think a lot of y'all know this, but one thing that I've seen is, and this is fabulous, in our observations is a lot of LEAs at the more administrative district level, they are starting to allow teachers and school personnel take over the testing more and to be those test administrators. And so with that comes a lot more questions. And so this is information that we came up with that we would love for you to have and to share with your colleagues or test administrators or even teachers that are giving this test. So if they have questions. So the first thing is Access is an academic English proficiency test, and it's a proficiency test in the domains of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. This is in no way a content test like Utah Spire Plus or RISE or even Acadian's math and reading, right? So any content knowledge that the student may need for access is provided in the test. It's the student's ability to use that academic content and academic English in the areas of reading, writing, speaking, and listening that matter. Okay. So it's not assessing content knowledge, it's assessing academic English usage. Okay. Another thing that I think a lot of people forget about Access is that Access is actually a semi-adaptive test. Okay. So the first two domains that are administered are reading and listening. How students perform on the reading and listening portions will determine a tier placement for their speaking and writing domains. There are 3 speaking domains and 2 writing domains. Okay. So always remember it is semi-adaptive based on how students are performing. So one question that we've actually gotten quite a bit going into our next slide is a lot of students are, or a lot, we've had, and this is the first year we've really had this come up. A lot of test administrators have been saying, how did my student get into a higher tier for speaking and writing? Okay, again, not a content test. So we really wanted to hone in on language versus literacy. Okay, and this will really help because the most common thing I've actually heard is, well, when I give the student Acadians testing, they can't read. Acadians and Access are 2 totally different tests that measure totally different things. Okay, so Access measures language acquisition. So learning academic English language, okay, and those skills. Acadience, and Dallas can always chime in here because she helped me wordsmith this. Acadience measures the application, so reading skills. So, one thing to remember is both tests, you need both tests to inform instruction for your students, okay? One's going to inform something different. So, the way we wanted you to think about this is think about access as this broad, wide angle lens that assesses a student's ability to communicate and understand academic English, okay? Acadience is more of that, like, let's zoom in, and it's more of a microscope that assesses the student's ability to decode, essentially, attack that text and read fluently. If a student scores low on Acadience, it might just mean they need phonics intervention, not necessarily that they don't understand English instructions, okay? And so just remembering tests have different purposes. And one test does not mean they can't perform on another. Okay. You want both tests to inform, um, you want both tests to inform the instruction that the students will receive. Okay. So again, we would be happy to help you engage in these conversations. The great thing is that we have more questions coming up. That tells us that more people are engaged in this testing. They're interested and they want to know. So we are always happy to provide data dives and walk you through what does the data mean and how does it help you with instruction. So again, please just remember that if you're like, wow, how did the student get into such a high tier? Because it is semi-adaptive. Again, this is assessing and it's based on listening and reading. It's a test for academic English usage. Okay. It's not a literacy test. Okay. So let us know if you do have questions, and we can get into this even more. But we just wanted to provide some talking points if you have found that this is something coming up in your schools, in your LEAs. Okay. And I'm seeing some good comments. Yeah, Hal, it is a rigorous test when it comes to academic English. And even this is a question that we've gotten a lot. Well, if I gave this test to my native English speakers, how would they do? Well, has that native English speaker been taught how to use academic English in all the content areas, right? And this is why we say really academic English learning is the job of all educators, right? I always use Scott as an example because he's always like, Megan, I do not want you, Miss ELA, teaching my kids how to speak the language of science because you make us sound pompous and arrogant. And I'm like, well, Scott, you probably deserve to be pompous and arrogant because you know a lot. But he's like, no. He was like, science, we use passive language. UELA people, you're all active voice, right? So again, you've heard me say it a lot. Scott would rather say discoveries were made. He doesn't want to say I made a discovery. Scott gives the thumbs up, right? So it really does take, everyone to know, like, I'm a content expert in the content that I teach. I need to make sure that all students have access to that content, academic English language, so they can access the content, right? So again, all students, they're all academic language learners. So, all right. If students get into a lower tier for speaking and writing, that is probably a good indication their academic English acquisition is struggling, correct? Um, in those domains, quite possibly, but again, we won't know until the score report comes out because you never know, they might actually blow us away in the speaking and writing. So some students have more strengths in certain areas than others. Some have really strong receptive skills, and some have really good expressive skills. One thing that we do definitely see, and this is not just in Utah, it's across the country, a lot of students have really, really good academic English listening skills. And that kind of speaks to still the old school sit and get lectures in classrooms, right? So we still do see quite a bit of really high listening scores, but not so much in maybe speaking. And that kind of tells us that, hey, students need more opportunities to engage in academic content, English conversations in their classroom, right? So again, we still see that trend across the country. All right. Um, Oh, and I got a private chat just saying someone did make a little did you know infographic from the two slides already in Gemini. And if this person's okay, she said she would be happy to share that. So if that person is willing to come off so I could call that person out, she would be happy to share that resource. If I get a thumbs up from that person, I'll let you know who it is so y'all can bug her for those slides. Okay, moving on until we know. Um, Again, this is something that we discussed already. Standard setting. Oh, okay, I got the thumbs up. It's Jolyn K. Torgensen. So she said she's happy to share the link if you want to direct message her. So she made some did you know slides really, or infographic really quickly. So if you would like to see what she just created, send her a private chat and she'll give you the link. All right. So again, access standard setting taking place this summer. As far as y'all are concerned, you should not feel any hiccups for anything. Everything, all the hiccups are going to be internally on our end. USBE, our TAC, our APAC, and WIDA and DRC. So you should experience nothing. Again, as things are happening, we will be sure to communicate everything with you. But as far as y'all are concerned, please exit students the regular way you would. You're getting your reports. And then as we complete standard setting this summer, we will be sure to communicate everything out to you for next steps and the implications for possibly having to create new growth, possibly having to create new exit. We really won't know though until that standard setting taking place in July is completed. And then, like I said, just be patient. We'll keep you in the know. We actually have quite a few Utah educators participating in that event though, so you might hear some little sneak peeks into what took place. And then, of course, as you know, next slide, everything has been submitted to US Ed. We are still just waiting to hear back. We are really, really grateful for your patience with this. It's been a long wait. We're just really hoping we hear back soon. But until we get that approval, unfortunately, we can't exit our students taking alternate access until we get the approval. So just keep on hanging on. Trust me, we're going to throw a party once we get this approved for you all. Brittany is ready. Okay. She's like, let's throw this party. Ben, why is there no delay with WIDA when there has been with other standard setting? What's the difference? So that's a great question, Ben. So with this standard setting, they are doing a ton of concordance work on the back end. So they are providing the original scale and also the new scale. So they are doing hefty, hefty cross crosswalks on the back end. And so and this has been something in the works for a couple years, knowing that it was coming. And also because of Title III law, and being able to exit kids, on the timeline that's required by, federal law, um, a lot of work had to be put into that. And they have an entire team of psychometricians, research analysts, data analysts, everything, a huge team working on this, on the back end. When we had ELA, we don't have that kind of capacity without it being hugely expensive for a state test. We belong, to a consortium where 41, I think 42 states or territories or protectorates are now, there and involved, so they can have a larger team and the implications are huge. But yeah, it is, they do have a huge team that can work on this. And also, again, there were Title III laws that were basically kind of requiring that it happen. Sid, I think, wants to jump in as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the thought. I think it's an interesting idea of what WIDA is doing, where they're providing both the score from the new scale and the previous scale or the current scale, I guess, and getting scores on both. I think it's something that we can bring to our TAC and see if there's a possibility, if that's something that can happen. I know how you mentioned next year where we have new high school assessments for sure for ELA and science, likely not new for math. So math probably won't be delayed for high school next year because we'll be reverting back to the um, previous blueprints that we used for secondary 1 and 2 math, until the new standards are approved. But I think it's something that would be an interesting discussion topic that we could bring to our TAC and see what it is that's possible. I know when we've talked in the past, because we're realigning all of these items to the new scale, not sure how possible it would be, but understand that delay in assessment results is difficult for everyone. And we know we've got that coming up again next year with new high school assessments for math and, or excuse me, for ELA and science for sure next year. So I think something that we can look into what possibilities are. I know there's been issues in the past, but I think it's something that we can push with our vendor to see what's possible because that's important for people to get results. What's hard, I think, is giving two different results if there's different scales, because then which one is the one? You know what I mean? Like when we have two different, if we're providing new cut scores, if we're providing new guidance on what is proficient, and if one scale says they're proficient, but the other scale doesn't, and we're providing both as results, like I have questions about what that looks like. So I think it's something to look into and understanding that the ultimate goal is results to the students and you all as soon as possible. So something that we can look into. I don't know that we can promise anything and have some questions about it, but for sure something to look further into.
Yeah, and Hal, boy, I feel ya. I wish that we could apply Title III to all tests, but, you know, boy, we can all dream, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Are risk averse, but they also will give us guidance on what are options of things that might be able to work. And again, our TAC are they provide feedback, but ultimately it's left up to us. But it'd be us working with our vendor on what would be possible. And our TAC can provide us with guidance or options that would be possibilities or not.
right. And one other thing that I would bring up is, with WIDA access, this, like I said, this has been, work leading up to this July standard setting, this has been work that has actually been taking place to get ready for and ensure that it can be done because we knew that Title III law would have to still like, you know, supersede everything and we would still have to meet the letter of the law. So this work really has been going on. I want to say, if memory serves, for about 2.5, almost 3 years now. Um, and for Utah, our legislation, it only changed a year ago. Like we did not have that runway in Utah the way that we did with WIDA either. So timing also definitely plays a role in it, where I think we had the luxury of being proactive versus reactive with WIDA because we knew it was coming down the pipeline years ago versus only finding out because of legislation changes a year ago. So I think having huge teams to work on things costs a lot of money, but also having a longer runway and time also plays a big factor in it all. So, um, we'll keep on working though for you all, and we hear you. Do you know that? All right. And then I think my last slide is just, hey, reach out. Let us know what you need. I do really want to draw your attention to all the resources. I do find a lot of the questions being asked are all easily answered on our many WIDA resources. Going to our USBE WIDA tab under assessments tends to answer almost all questions. And then also that special EL assessment guidance that's posted there. That also answers a ton because we still do get a lot of questions pertaining to the parental exclusion forms and stuff like that, which, surprise, they don't exist for WIDA. So, um, again, if you need help with any of that stuff, we're happy to assist you, but also do know that a lot of your questions can be answered if you don't want to wait for me or Tracy to get back to you on our many websites and resources. So, with that, thank you. And thank you for inviting us to your schools. We've had adventures. It has been crazy. I mean, I'm telling y'all, we had testing and then going into lockdown in our observations. We had, testing and like students just as happy as could be and just wanted to hang out with us. And what we have seen has been incredible. And we thank you for welcoming us into your buildings, into your districts, into your schools. And we just relish the opportunity. I have told many LEAs, if you want us to come out to observe any screening and be a partner with you there, just reach out. We want to be there. We've loved it. So, happy winter, by the way. And I'm done.
Thanks, Megan. Before we jump in with the Acadians, Hal had one more question about the timeline for standard setting for next year for the high school ELA and science assessments. We would love to be able to do it as soon as school gets out. Unfortunately, there's a lot of processes that we have to go through before we move into standard setting. So we move into a data review. We also do a rubric validation where any of the items that we're field testing, we have to apply other measures. So previously, like when we did the standard setting for the middle school science back in 2018, that we did in like September. We've moved our last couple of standard settings to be able to be like the last week of July or the first week of August. That is like the earliest our vendor has been able to get that done. But we appreciate and push them as much as we can to hold those standard settings as early as possible. Unfortunately, there's other processes that they have to go through before they are ready for the standard setting. So likely it'll be on that same timeline next year in like the very, very end of July or the very, very beginning of August. We try and do it as early as possible. And then the process, as you know, is after we hold that standard setting, then we have to take that to our board where our board has to approve those, and then they have to go through and apply. Once the board has approved where those proficiency cuts are, then the vendor has to go through and apply those cuts in their system and actually score based on where we tell them the cuts should be. So that's why that process takes a while. We usually get that done in like August. And then September, our board approves, and then the results, it takes a couple of weeks. So they're typically in like early to mid October when the results are finalized and ready for everybody. So we know that process and that timeline is difficult when you're trying to look at results. So we can help and see if there's any way that we can push that back earlier. It would not be possible to do in June, but possibly a little bit earlier in July. Then we might be able to meet the August board meeting, so we can see getting that maybe a month earlier. Luckily, it's only, well, unfortunately, the math standards will likely be coming the following year, so it'll be a delay again with results for the full results. But any of the non-high school students should have those scores immediately, and the high school students that are participating in math will likely have those scores immediately. But unfortunately, next year it'll be high school, ELA, and science that will be results will be delayed until after standard setting. So field testing items in May. Yeah, so all of our items will be field tested, but with all of the items being field tested, we're still putting them on. We have to determine where that proficiency cut is with the standard setting. Okay, so something we can look into and talk with other people about what that looks like for the representative sample. We have a lot of students that test, which is good for us with as far as field testing. Looking at some of the populations of students that are smaller, getting the representative sample is a little more difficult. So I think some of that will be things we can look into of what could be done to speed up the process of scoring, but I don't know that it for sure wouldn't happen in June. Like I said, we may be able to push things possibly a month earlier, but likely it won't be much earlier than that. But again, we might be able to see what's happening. I know Hawaii is doing things with AI. They're possibly looking at field testing students with possible results from students. I think our board is really against using AI to predict field testing of items. So it's not something that our state has been interested in doing. But I know with advances in technology, there are other options and things that we can definitely look into with our vendor and what might be possible. All right. Thank you. Sorry to Allison. Jared, go ahead.
No problem. All right, so we'll talk about Acadians. Next slide. So we're sharing the beginning of year data. This has been cleaned up and I had the business rules applied. So just note that when you pull up this spreadsheet, at the bottom are two tabs. One will be for the state data and one will be for the LEA data. Next slide. A reminder that you've got a little over a week to finish entering the data from the Acadians testing for middle of year and getting those parent notifications out. And then just a reminder or something looking forward into the future, the end of year dates for the test administration. Next slide. And information regarding the reading training. And you can see there's multiple options depending on your grade level. And then there's also a refresh course in Canvas, and the link to enroll for that is there at the bottom of the slide. Next slide. All right. So we've created a video that is about helping people understand how to read and go through the Acadians Parent Report. And this video is applicable for Acadians Reading and Acadians Math, so really doesn't matter who's viewing the video. You'll get information regarding both of those parent reports and how to read that. In our minds, we're thinking this could be shared with teachers as well as parents to help them understand how they might use the parent report. We've provided the URL there, the link, as well as the QR code that they can utilize to access that video. It's a little over 3 minutes. I can't remember the exact time. But the link, as you can see in the URL, it's going to take you to the YouTube channel for Acadians that the assessment section has. Letters. Yeah, I've been working on them, and that's why we've had this. We've done a lot of changes and updates, so I'm hoping to be able to get the sample letters for Acadians Math. We're hoping to put these QR codes for the videos and other activities on those. So I'm working on those and hope to have those shortly. Next slide. I think that's it. Yep. That's all we had for Acadians.
Okay, short and sweet. Thanks, Jared. Okay, DLM, we have quite a few updates that we want to dig in and get to with you guys this morning. So go ahead, Sid. Or Emily, sorry. Sid was the box that I'm seeing. Okay, spring testing information. So the window opens on March 9th, so we're a couple weeks away from DLM, that window opening. And it runs till June 5th. So that is our state window. However, the expectation is that you guys are done with testing DLM at least 2 weeks before your last day of school. And that's the information that we share with teachers as well. I don't recommend trying to box your teachers into that same sort of 4 week or 6 week window that you do with other assessments. I do recommend giving teachers that full window to get through testing. So there is a total of 24 to 26 testlets that a student will see. Each student's going to see 9 testlets in ELA, and then anywhere from 6 to 8 in math, depending on their grade level, and they'll see 9 testlets in science. Okay, I think we talked about this earlier this year, and I've been communicating this in all my trainings with teachers. So we have some updated DLM Science Essential Elements that got released this year. We've spent the last 3 years working on this across the consortium. Some of your folks out in your districts may have been part of it. And so with that, we've also been doing some item writing, and we have to field test some of these new science items aligned to the updated science standards. So with that, we have to do field testing. And so what's going to happen is we actually did, as a consortium, we went to the federal government and we did ask if there was any way, especially with the nature of this population, if we could forego an operational assessment and just move in place with a field test assessment as our operational assessment. And unfortunately, they told us no. So as partners, state partners in DLM, we've spent quite a bit of time, and Sid can attest to that, trying to navigate how do we do this that's going to be the least impactful on teachers and students, and there's never just any good way to do this. So what is going to happen this year is your teachers will see their 9 operational science testlets, and then they're going to end up seeing 4 field tests that are come down in 2 sets. And so teachers should be able to navigate which ones are the operational scorable tests for this year versus the field tests, because there should be a capital FT in that test session name. So we have been communicating this again with teachers that have been doing training. And so when these field tests deliver, they're going to deliver at the open of the window. So your teachers will go in and they'll see a line for their ELA testlets for the students, math, science, and then they'll see a second one for these science field testlets. So teachers have the autonomy in how they want to do that. If they want to do the regular testlets first and then the field testlets at the end, that is entirely up to them. They have the entire window to do that. As I've been telling teachers, we are not here to torture students. We are not here to torture teachers. We have some students that it is going to take everything they have, if they can, to get through all those operational testlets with kiddos. If that is the case, please forego field testing. However, we do need that field test data because that is what is used to go forward in standard setting. And so we do, if we don't get enough data across the consortium, and we definitely want Utah's kiddos represented in that data set, then we'll have to do more field testing next year before we go operational. So there's a little bit more that is on teachers for doing science testing this year. And this is where we landed. There will also most likely next fall, just as a heads up, be another set of field test items that'll come out that we will be asking teachers to do in the fall, so that DLM will have time to be ready to put out this new assessment for next spring. Teachers will also see some field test items for ELA and math. They have not stopped refreshing those pools. Again, if they can complete those with students, great. If not, we're not going to stress about it. Science is definitely the most important right now. And then the ELA math field testlets come at the end of the operational ones. And again, they'll see that FT in that test session name. So that's how they know there's those field tests. The other thing that teachers will see is there's a teacher survey that gets delivered down to the system at the open of the window for every student. And I always tell teachers it's not required. They have the option to fill that out and give direct feedback to DLM, but to please wait until they're completely done with testing and then do that afterwards. DLM does look at that data. And in fact, we get Utah responses. We don't get individual responses, individual school responses. We just get that teacher survey data back as like a whole set, statewide set. And we do look at that. Maureen and I have been digging into that data a little bit here and there, and we make some shifts in what we're doing as far as like training and practices and technical assistance based upon some of that. Okay, so that's where we're at with spring testing. Any questions on what the expectations are going to be and what teachers are going to see when testing opens up in March? So it's kind of a lot. We know that there's already this space of, we feel like there's a lot of testing that happens, but hopefully we can get some good data. Okay, go ahead. Next slide, please. Okay, here's just a reminder, as district test coordinators or whomever has been designated that person in your district, if that falls on your special ed department, will you please make sure you pass these slides along to them? The responsibilities for the district folks is we just want to make sure that 1% flag is set on students. Marina and I got an email again today that they're missing a student. So going in and double checking that scram record, making sure that there isn't a fatal error on that, is that 1% flag set so they can go to DLM. It can take upwards to anywhere from 2 to 4 days to get from you to us to DLM. So DLM reaches into USBE at 9 p.m. every night to pull that load. So if your load hasn't processed long before that, it could take another 24, 36 hours for that student to flow through. So just be a little bit patient once all that stuff comes in. It is the responsibility of whoever is your district test coordinator to create those rosters. I've been working on some of that with your teachers as they've been joining me for training, so we're slowly trickling some of that in, but we do put that onus on you folks. Um, Also, you'll want to check and ensure that your teachers have completed that required training in DLM, that first contact surveys and P&P settings are open, and then ensuring that the secure testing browser student portal is downloaded onto devices. Students can use Chromebooks, desktops, Macs, iPads, and even Android devices. And then we are asking that you guys are helping monitor testing progress and especially our tips pages, as well as dashboards and entering special circumstance codes. Okay, next slide. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of these. So, when pulling data extracts to help you guys monitor these things and figure out which teachers have completed training, what's going on with rosters and students, there are various different components in DLM that you can use to do that. So, when you want to pull a data extract for monitoring, you click under that Reports tab and then under Data Extracts. And when you get into whichever data extract you're pulling, you'll go over and you'll be able to click an update or run that extract. And what pops up is this field for you to filter. So if you want to look at a specific school, you can move in and filter down to a specific school. Or if you're looking to just run any of these extracts at the high level, district level to get all of your schools, just note that you don't have to put something in that school filter. You can leave it blank and then click OK, and it will actually produce that report for you for your entire district or LEA. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the data extracts that are beneficial to you to use between now and March or whenever you're going to start testing is looking at that training status of your teachers and users and that security agreement. So if you have any folks that you find in that extract that have not completed the security agreement, that means they haven't even logged into DLM this year. So every year when you first log in, it's the very first thing that pops up is teachers have to accept that security agreement. And then from there, you can come in and filter and look at like the training status, who's completed training and who hasn't. So those are data extracts for you under that data management tab that you can go in and look at those things. And everything produces in a CSV file. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the other thing that can be beneficial is looking at that student roster and first contact survey status. So I believe it was last year. Maureen can correct me if I'm wrong. Last year or the year before, they combined the student roster and first contact survey status extract, which is awesome because those are the two things that need to happen in order for testlets to deliver down. So you'll see that that extract that sits under the student information tab, and it's the very bottom one, and you can produce a new file and it pulls up that Excel spreadsheet, and then you can move in and start filtering to see which students are on rosters and then who has first contact surveys completed. The P&P settings are good. I did have someone reach out and ask, how do we know if teachers have updated that? So unfortunately, there's not a requirement to update P&P settings. So a lot of times you'll see Maureen's name is the timestamp in things because she's the one that kind of helps pull those loads. So if teachers have not updated P&P settings, you'll see Maureen's name in there in that timestamp. And some teachers, like if there is something to update, they'll change that. If not, it could just roll from year to year. So I think the most beneficial extract in the P&P is the setting counts. And so you can look and see what are the various settings and reach out to teachers if they need support. Do you have any Braille that's been indicated or sign language or switches or anything like that? Okay, next. Okay, so during testing, we are asking that you actively monitor what's going on with testing. So we have multiple ways that we can do that. So under that test administration and monitoring tab in Educator Portal, you have these three extracts, the DLM test administration monitoring. And so with that one, you can go in and you can see how many testlets has the student have they completed, what's in progress, and it'll actually also show you where students may have engaged or teachers may have engaged students in those instructionally embedded assessments too. So you can run that extract and see what's going on with testing. If you've got teachers by the time you come back from spring break that haven't started testing, you might want to give them a little nudge to get that going. So that is a really great one. The tips access page. So we are asking you to monitor that, and we are monitoring this as well. What the test information page is it is the page that delivers down into the system for each test that a student gets assigned, and it gives the teacher information on what essential element they're being tested at, what linkage level. Is it computer administered or teacher administered? And if they're teacher administered testlets, which are typically at that initial precursor, the easiest linkage level, they're required to gather testing materials. And the way the testlet is administered to these students is it's an interaction that the teacher does with the student off the computer. And so if we have teachers that are not accessing this tips page, and especially at the initial precursor level, that means they're opening up testing sessions blind, and not being prepared to test. So we are monitoring this, and those of you that have been with me, I think we started really heavily monitoring this last year. Throughout the window starting now, when that opens in March, I'll start reporting out to you what we're seeing in that component. And it literally is click data. And I've told your teachers the same, that we're monitoring it. We're asking you guys to monitor it. And I get the teacher name. I can see exactly which testlet was administered to a student and if that teacher clicked on it. So it is literally click data. So we are asking you to monitor that. The next one is the DLM on-demand special circumstance file. So that's a new one that came about a couple years ago to allow you to kind of keep an eye on what is being submitted for those special circumstance codes or those non-participation codes. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so here's where we're sitting currently statewide as of yesterday. So right now I have a little over 2,000 users enrolled in DLM with a teacher role. Now, does that mean I have 2,000 teachers as a whole? Not necessarily, but that's what it's showing me. So 2,000 active or pending teachers with that teacher role. So the security agreement, I have about 1,200 active or pending users with that teacher role that have not even signed into Educator Portal yet. And then the training status. So right now we've got about 1,400 users with that teacher role in DLM that haven't completed training. So just kind of gives you high level scope of where we are sitting statewide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's where we're at with students. So right now I've got 4,600 students enrolled in DLM. As of yesterday, we had 841 kiddos not on an ELA roster, 847 not on a math roster, and 743 not on a science roster. We always expect science to be a little less because third grade students don't roster to science. We don't test science. So when you're in that student roster and first contact survey to figure out that data extract to figure out who's not rostered. When you go to look at science, make sure you filter out third grade because it will populate third grade into that not rostered for science, and we wouldn't expect those kiddos to be rostered. Okay, so first contact survey. So this is enrolled students, not just students with rosters. So all my enrolled students, I'm looking at 19 students that have that first contact survey in progress. 847 students have not even started, which would make sense because that's my highest number of students not rostered. We have 200 or 2,000 and 2,300, sorry, 2,300 students that are ready to submit, meaning information is filled out, everything is probably rolled over from those students, and the teachers just need to go back in and verify the information is correct and submit that. So again, the status in that first contact survey must say completed in order for testlets to deliver down to students. Okay, next slide. Okay, so there are some pretty handy dandy dashboards that DLM has come up with a couple years ago to just give you kind of a really quick high level overview of what's going on with first contact, survey status, testing progress, and then a couple other dashboards that we're asking you to monitor. So this first dashboard here is the first contact survey status. If you'll notice, what this shows is this doesn't show you all of your students enrolled in your district. It only shows you students that are rostered and what the status is of those students that are rostered. So this data may look a little bit different from that other extract that you pull, but this is high level. Of all my students that are sitting on teachers' rosters right now, this is the status of that first contact survey. So this is a great, really high level overview. Okay, the next the next dashboard is this testing progress. So once the window opens, you'll be able to come in and plug in specific schools. Your district's probably preset for you. And then you do have to filter in the specific subject, whether it's ELA, math, or science, and it will run that, give you a pie chart and some information on where you're at with testing progress across your districts or schools. So that's a really great kind of high level figure out where you need to might maybe hone into different things. Okay, the next dashboard is testing outside of hours. So we do look at this and we're asking you to kind of monitor this too. We actually have had some LEAs over the last couple years since these dashboards have become available, where they've actually discovered some not cool things going on with teachers and DLM administration. And so this is a really important one. So we've set our testing hours to be 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so anytime a teacher um, is able to go in and they can access the educator portal and testing outside those hours, but anytime they do, it will go ahead and it will timestamp this. It's outside of hours and it will tell you those teachers that are accessing it, the student name, the school, when the testlet was started, when it ended, and what was the test end reason. So this is a good one to monitor. We actually did have an incident last year where we had a kiddo that took their login information home over the weekend and on their device actually logged in to Kite Portal and completed some testlets on their own over the weekend. So this really is a good one to monitor, and it is interesting the things that we see. Okay, next page. So when using this dashboard, there are a couple things, and sorry that red box, I thought we fixed it, but it keeps moving. There are a couple things that we want to look for. So in that test end reason, the things that you're going to look for and we want to be concerned about is when we see a testlet done outside of those hours and it's an exit does not save, means that it was someone, the teacher or the student logged in. Sometimes we have found that it is teachers logging into student testlets. So it was logged into, it was started or at least looked at, and then they hit that exit does not save button to get out of the testlet. So that's one to investigate. And of course, if you have a submitted testlet that happened in outside hours, you want to investigate that. And sometimes you'll see other for just various scenarios. Those would be the ones you want to investigate. If when you look at those outside hours and you see the reason is a test reset, which I was looking at our statewide, we have a handful of those in. Don't worry about those that say test reset. So usually that will have a timestamp around that 11 p.m. that they ended it, and that's DLM. So sometimes if there was some sort of power outage or the computer shut off, or we are requesting test reset, so some weird anomaly happened and that testlet gets reset to redeliver the next day. So don't worry about those too much. You're really looking for those top 3 reasons to do some investigation on. Okay, and so if you do find anything, please reach out. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns or and so we've caught some interesting things over the last couple years with this monitoring dashboard. Okay, next slide. So the other one you have is this short duration. So this is kind of an interesting one. This will go ahead and indicate and mark timestamp for you if a student opens up a testlet and completes it in under 1 minute. It tags it and it will throw it in here. So I was looking at statewide. We have quite a few that filter in, and of course, we've been doing instructionally embedded testlets. So it is kind of interesting. You have a lot of information that comes into this dashboard that reports for you what was going on. It gives you the number of items that was in that testlet, how many they got correct. And so this one pops up every year. I would imagine almost all of you will have one or two that kind of land in this dashboard. And really, the idea is if you start to see kind of a repeat pattern with one student or with a teacher or with a school, you might want to do some investigating. Is there something going on accessibility wise that is troublesome that we need to support the teacher with? And so it could mean that there's something happening that shouldn't be, or it could be totally fine too. But it's just another viewpoint to kind of look at, what's going on out in schools with administration. Okay, next one. Okay, so any questions so far on kind of expectations with monitoring resources? It was kind of a lot for sure. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Okay, so let me know if anything pops up. Okay, let's walk through special circumstance codes. If you have not been paying attention, you might want to pay attention now because this is really exciting news. Um, you guys from the field have requested for several years, is there any way to set those participation codes, non-participation codes at like a student level or a subject level? And the answer is yes. So DLM heard us. They responded and they've built this out. So this is the best news ever. So only district test coordinators or building test coordinators are the roles that can enter special circumstance codes. You can now set that at the student level, subject, or you can still do it the old way at the test session level if needed. And I have updated the DLM special circumstance code technical assistance document on that district Padlet. So it is there and ready for you to go with all the screenshots that are needed. So we'll walk through this just really quickly. Next slide. So in order to set a special circumstance code at the student level, the best part about this is you do not have to put the student on the roster and you do not have to submit the first contact survey. So those were required in previous years and you no longer have to do that. So if you already have those students that you know have parent opt out, for example, you don't need to roster that student. You don't need to submit the first contact survey. And that does help ensure that we don't have testing that happens by accident. And so in order to do that, you can set those now at this point, as long as the students are enrolled in DLM, you don't have to wait for that window to open. And unfortunately, the picture here is cutting off our direction. So you'll definitely want to refer back to that technical assistance document. But what you do is you go into settings and click on students. And then you'll see this third tab, special circumstance code that opens up. And then this is where you can filter to the school or just find that individual student number, click search, and it drops them all in. And you can just come in and enter for each student that special circumstance code, hit save, and it's done. It covers all subjects for that student. And so another little trick with DLM, which I didn't know if you guys are aware of, but in our grids that happen in all of our pages here, if you look at the student state SSID, for example, and you see those three little dots next to it, if you hover over that, it'll open up a filter and then you can come in and just plug in the SSIDs and hit enter and it'll find that student for you. And that's a way you can go about entering those special circumstance codes. Okay, next slide. If you want to set it at a subject level, so parents can opt out per subject. So maybe a parent opts out of ELA, but a student's taking math or science. So again, you go to that same settings, students, click on the special circumstance codes table, and then you just click over above that grid to set it at a subject level. And then you can, for the various subjects, choose what that special circumstance code is. Okay. And then the next slide. Okay, so that is really exciting news with special circumstance codes. We were super excited that DLM got that up and going and running this year. So hopefully that will make things a little bit easier for you and teachers when needing to set those. Okay, so this is just a nice test administrator checklist. You can take this, give this out to your teachers. There's also a TA document that's on the Padlets with this information too. So just a reminder, here's the expectations that your teachers have for administering DLM. And then next slide. That might be it, just the links to the Padlet. So just remember there's that corkboard Padlet is for you folks as district people, and there's all kinds of technical assistance documents and manuals pertaining to you, and then just a reminder of the Padlet that we have for teachers. And that, friends, is all I have today. And I was clear as mud. There was no questions. Okay, please reach out if anything comes up.
Right. Thank you, Tracy. And we have been providing you lots and lots of information for a little over an hour and a half. So I think we're all ready for a break. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break before we move into this next section. So let's come back at 10:51. Do a 10-minute break. Right, it is 10:51. So if we have either Elise or Scott, one of them is going to be doing this next section.
I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks, Elise.
Yep. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide. These two documents have been produced by the Center for Assessment regarding balanced assessment systems. USBE works really closely with them in various aspects of our work. And even one of their personnel, Scott Marion, actually leads our technical advisory committee. But these two documents are meant to explore the history of balanced assessment and provide guidance to states and LEAs on how to best create and maintain a culture of productive assessment, to improve teaching and learning and provide guidance for using data to improve the assessment system itself, just so that it better serves students and teachers. The updated 2024 volume of Reimagining Balanced Assessment Systems, that's the one with the red title and the primarily blue cover, it lays the foundation for the work. And then the second document uses this foundation to translate the research on balanced assessment into more practical support and guidance for district and school leaders specifically. I've provided links to both of these on the slide. They're both really great resources. Go ahead and go to the next slide though. That second document focuses on more specific questions like how balanced is your local assessment system and how would you even know? Or what might be out of balance given your current instructional reality. It then goes into how you can work to improve the balance of your local assessment system. And we just wanted you to be aware that over the next few months, we at USBE are going to highlight some of the work in these documents, primarily focusing on the most common threats to balanced assessment systems and practical next steps that you can take to address those. I just wanted to give you a little teaser here in case you wanted to familiarize yourself with those before we take a deeper dive into the coming months. And with that, we're going to talk about RISE now. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Here are some general information points for RISE testing, just to be aware of. The testing window is coming up. It opens March 10th and goes through June 5th. Remember that your LEA should have selected 8 weeks within that window for your administration, which does not include your last week of school. Okay. You also want to make sure, though, that you're leaving enough time to conduct any makeup testing for students who may have missed your general administration window. If you need to make changes to your previously submitted testing plan at any time, you can actually communicate those with Scott. The next point on the slide I want you to be aware of is I've been reporting recently about a couple of missing fields when entering participation codes for students. This issue has now been resolved, so you should be able to enter any of the participation codes for interim and summative assessments now, where previously a couple of those were missing. And finally, our Rise Summative Administration training that was held on February 10th has been posted to YouTube. So if you missed that, you can go back and watch it at your convenience or share it with anyone that you feel would benefit from the information that it has. Emily also provided the slide deck that I used through Midas. So if you registered and attended, you actually have access to those slides as well. That little red arrow in the screenshot actually calls out where you can find those if you need them. Next slide. During that training, I emphasized the importance of the training tests, but I wanted to reiterate it here. There are two different ways to access those. The guest user version titled training test can be accessed by anyone at any time, while the test administration version allows teachers to create live sessions for their students that just better simulate the RISE testing environment with a required login, as well as using the secure browser. The training tests for math and science are also provided with Spanish adaptive functionality. So if you go to the next slide, any students who may benefit from that experience can be exposed to the training test system in that language environment as well. Guidance for how to take the training test with that functionality is outlined in the TAM starting on page 49, I believe. But basically, you go through the training test. You just select your grade and content area, but remember this is only for math and science. And then on the choose settings screen, you can select Spanish from that drop-down menu. Next slide. When you select that, this is going to change the functionality within the system for the student, and the screen's contents will then change to Spanish, and the student will be able to use that toggle globe switch to be able to toggle between the Spanish language and the English language. If after consulting with your language services team, that includes the student as well as the student's parents, if the student wishes to have this experience with a summative test, you would then need to apply that in the student settings. This is only how to access it for the training test. Okay. There's also primary translation guidance for the use of the Spanish adaptive functionality of the test, as well as how to prepare for and administer the RISE test for languages other than Spanish included in the RISE TAM, and that starts on page 41 of the RISE TAM. Next slide. I mentioned this last month, but Maureen and I are still seeing situations where teachers don't have students rostering appropriately, whether it be due to incorrect course codes being used or not having a cactus entered in Tide, or not having an account with their current organization and still being associated with their previous organization. So just please make sure that you are monitoring both teacher and school admin user accounts, even now through the year. And when it comes to your student rostering data, having everything set correctly now is just really going to save you from entering a lot of participation codes later. So continue checking those things. The next thing I wanted to talk about, next slide, is the expiration timelines with the RISE assessments, because we are seeing quite the winter uptick in test appeals to reopen interim assessments, which unknowingly expired before the student was able to complete it. In some cases, these test experiences have even expired twice because the teacher didn't have the students continue after the LEA had approved the first appeal. Just continue to communicate to users in the field that once a student starts, those test opportunities, they don't last forever, okay? Getting through them in a more timely manner is definitely encouraged. As a reminder, because of the shortened nature and unlimited allowance of benchmark modules, those tests can be retaken at any time if a student isn't able to finish an attempt. There's really no reason to reopen or reset a benchmark unless it's a writing benchmark, okay? Because we don't want students to lose their paragraphs of progress. Okay. Also, for what it's worth, we are actually currently working with CAI to extend this benchmark expiration timeline, so stay tuned for updates on that. Summative tests are generally taken well within their window, so I'm less concerned with those. This expiration issue does tend to affect interim assessments more regularly. Just know that if a student's test opportunity for an interim has expired, you can create and then approve a test appeal for that interim opportunity for it to be reopened. And guidance is included in the RISE Tide user guide. But please, please, please pay attention that when creating and approving those, because this is going to be a situation where you want to make sure that you've asked for the test to be reopened and not reset. Because when you reset a test, it requires the student to start over completely. And if they were already halfway through or even three-quarters of the way through their interim assessment, if you do a reset, it is going to start them completely over. And what's even more frustrating for the student with that is with the adaptive functionality of the interim assessments. They can't just think, oh, yeah, this is how I answered question 2. This is how I answered question 3, because they might be getting a completely different set of questions. Okay. If you have questions regarding the test appeal process or want to ensure that you're approving or denying experiences appropriately, feel free to reach out to myself or Scott, and we're happy to kind of be your thought partner with that. Next slide, I think, is accommodations. Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to touch base on some high-level, frequently asked questions and topics around RISE accommodations. So as Elise said, our summative window is upon us. So with RISE, there's no really hard deadline for accommodations. You just want to make certain that you have applied any embedded accommodations within the assessment system in TIE prior to a student starting a session. And I would really think about within your LEA how you kind of have a checks and balances to ensure that all accommodations have applied as necessary. So that's going to look different in different LEAs. But having two sets of eyes on that can often eliminate errors in testing and just create a better experience for students when they're in a summative assessment and then you realize, oh my goodness, they don't have this accommodation. It can become frustrating for the student and for the staff at the LEA. And as Elise gave some guidance on language, one of the more common, very common requests we get during summative assessments is LEAs not feeling confident with the language that they chose for a student to access the RISE assessment, either that being an error in Spanish or English. We have our translation guidance for a reason, and we really encourage you to use that so you're making appropriate decisions on a case-by-case basis for each student in communication with the parent and the student, okay? When we are not involving the right people in these conversations, that's when all these issues occur, and we get so many calls during summative window of dozens of kids being exposed to an English that or a test that they're like, oh wait, no, we don't want this language. We're going to switch it. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work for the LEA to redo all of that. It's form-based, so it's not just a quick fix, and students have to restart their test. So that's not fun for any student. And so also just note, not the language accommodation, but for other accommodations, sometimes we get a lot of calls or a lot of ADs will hear from a teacher or something and say, they have this accommodation, but it's not showing up. When what really happened is somebody went and entered that accommodation after a student started taking the test and it didn't apply. So it's okay if you forget one. We definitely want you, if you catch it, correct it, but that student needs to log out and log back in order for that accommodation to show up in the student's settings. So that's a really common mistake and phone call that we receive. Next slide. So as Elise mentioned, we have primary language translation guidance. It is in RISE resources, but it's also in our Utah Accessibility Accommodations and Participation Policy. And I get a lot of phone calls about this. And the thing with this translation policy, it's not meant to be tricky. It's really just, in my opinion, just a common sense conversation of what language is going to result in the most accurate results for the student in their knowledge of the content that they're being assessed over. And that's going to vary just because, John and Sam are receiving the same supports. It doesn't mean that they need the same decision on assessment. So it really is a case by case basis. And for our older kiddos, they really should have some input in this. And I would really, really hone in on information from the classroom teachers. And so some of my guidance when I get these phone calls is, what is the quality of the translation services that they're providing instructionally? Because, you might have something on paper, but how is that being implemented with fidelity in the classroom? And I mean, we visit many schools, and understandably, there's staffing concerns. And I think, if you're being honest, sometimes kids are not receiving high quality translation. And so what that means is that student is then, they're not actually receiving instruction in their native language. So putting them on an assessment in their native language is not beneficial if they've never actually had that academic instruction. That would be very confusing to take a science Spanish test when in reality, if you have not been exposed to Spanish instruction in science, those kids might be speaking Spanish at home, but if they're not hearing it in an academic setting, that might not be the best indicator of their knowledge of the science standards. Okay, and this is just a quote from ESSA. That's all ESSA is saying too. ESSA is like, test them in the language that's going to yield the most accurate results, So we don't know that at USBE. You as an assessment director probably don't know that. Even an English language coordinator probably doesn't know that. I mean, the teachers should know that. Okay. So next slide. Yeah, and just again, you really should be considering what is the quality of that academic translation that the student is receiving. And for some kids that are kind of on the bubble with their RETA scores and their English acquisition, I mean, maybe give the kid a test in math in both languages and see how they perform, And then for your older kiddos have opinions. Ask the student. They should be involved. What does the student feel more comfortable in? If you're not getting those other qualitative measures and classroom based information, you probably can't make an informed decision. So, I've been in classrooms when they are, LEAs that have a very high English learner population. And the best that schools can do, given their circumstances, with teachers who are not bilingual, is they have text to speech on the screen for students in Spanish. But a case by case basis, maybe that's good for Johnny, but that's not really how Sam is absorbing his instruction. And maybe the way that one student can demonstrate their knowledge is they've actually, can demonstrate it more in English. So it's going to vary. It's so case by case. So the rumor that we've become aware of in LEAs is LEAs creating even more strict guidelines on who can have translation. And again, it's not a trick. It's really just to the benefit of the student. What do they know? And one barrier that we've heard is being put in place is they're saying if students were not, or if they were born in the United States, that they cannot have translation services. That is not an ESSA. So I wanted to squash that rumor mill that has come to our attention at the state. The place of birth is not in ESSA guidelines, and I would really question the ethical practice of placing more barriers on a student than the federal government is outlining. So we really want to make certain that we are deferring to ESSA guidelines and our state translation guidance policy, and not creating more barriers that do not even exist. Um, yeah, and just a reminder, parents and students should have a voice in their decision. While the same parameters are not placed on English learner decisions as they are for special education, I always advise if you are adhering to like the standard that is expected in special education IDEA policy, you're probably making the most appropriate professional decisions, and that is including everybody in the conversation. There's also been some concerns brought to the state about district personnel making decisions for students who've never seen a student, or maybe just popping in and doing like a 10-minute observation. And just personally, as a mother, I would find that concerning. I would hope that my classroom teacher would know more about my own child than just some random person from the district coming to see my child. So let's, I think, respect and value what our educators and teachers are seeing that are directly working with these students, so that we're making appropriate decisions. Okay, that's my platform. Next. Okay, one accommodation that does require state approval is for the use of a scribe, which could be a human scribe, or for the use of speech to text, which I can turn on at the state, and the guidance is in our TIDE guide for how to do that. We also have, and it's when somebody goes in to request this, these guidelines are linked. Our USBE scribe guidelines for state standardized assessment. I've received a lot of requests that really just don't make sense. While we don't necessarily want to intervene with IEP team decisions, we do have some qualifications on who we open this accommodation up to. And so this is just a summary of what is linked here. And the qualifications are: if a student has a physical disability that impairs their motor process for writing or typing, of course, that student might need a human scribe, or for writing, we have speech to text. If a student has a specific learning disability in written expression, which can also be referred to as dysgraphia, that student would be eligible for the use of a scribe. And then we also every year have a few kiddos who just go and break their arm. Those kiddos can definitely use speech to text or a scribe. One other key here is I am reluctant to approve these when you're literally letting me know that the student is not really routinely using, especially speech to text, in the classroom. And again, I say this is common sense. If a student is, speech to text is not necessarily easy to use. There is a learning curve in using that assistive technology. So if a student is not comfortable with speech to text, it is not appropriate to introduce that on statewide assessment. And I know Elise mentioned training test. If a student does want to test out the specific embedded speech to text option, I can make that setting in TIDE, and it will apply to a student's secure training test if they log in with their SSID. So they can, and I always suggest that, they can navigate that before the summative assessment, because sometimes you're using the embedded, which might be different than the specific ST that they're using instructionally. But when I'm getting requests and you're literally letting me know, hey, the IEP just decided that Johnny can use this. I mean, I have to kind of pause and really push the IEP team to, double check those decisions, because it's not necessarily going to be a great experience for the student. And same thing for human scribe. Dictating your thoughts to a human scribe can be very frustrating if that is not routinely used. So again, if you're not routinely using it, I would be cautious to request it. And then we want to make certain that the people who are submitting the request are verifying with the IEP team or 504 team that the student actually meets the outlined qualifications for a scribe. One of the most common things I'm seeing in request is the student struggles with their thoughts, so they use speech to text. Okay, speech to text is not a substitution for a language deficit. So that does not solve that problem. So that's another really confusing request that I receive. Okay, any questions, just email me and let me know. I think that's in Emily.
For Utah Aspire Plus, go ahead and go to the next slide. Your students can actually begin testing as early as March 2nd, which is literally less than 2 weeks away. So that window's coming up very quickly. Please make sure that you're paying attention to the information included in the schedule of events and ensure that your tech personnel are familiar with the information in the infrastructure trial guide, just so that your devices are ready before testing sessions begin. Okay, next slide. I shared this in January as well, but we've had a lot of teachers reach out recently asking about student prep tools for the Utah Aspire Plus test and the system itself. And when I provide these, they say, I didn't know these existed. So I'm going to just share them again to remind you to share them as well. So the question samplers are grade banded and content specific, so students can build familiarity with item types. And then the test nav tutorial is system based. Okay, so that's going to provide them with guidance on how to use the system, how to navigate between items, where to find tools, those types of things. Also, if you are testing remotely, you are required to administer a question sampler just prior to your summative test to ensure all communication tools are working on your teacher and student devices. Again, with those question samplers, once upon a time, a couple of years ago, they were limited to one administration per content area, and that is no longer the case. You can reach out to the Pearson Help Desk and have those reset as many times as you want so that students can have exposure to item types or practice within the system as often as you want. For what it's worth, Adam currently reports that 72 question samplers have been started by students. While I'm glad that there are students who have started using them, there are over 52,000 students rostering to take those. So 72 is a really small number. Okay, make sure your students are using the question samplers and test nav tutorial before they have to enter the system, especially your 9th grade students who have never seen this. Okay, it's not RISE, that's what they used in 8th grade. And then Jessica has more information with accommodations here as well.
I think you go to the next slide, Emily. So for Utah Aspire Plus, similar to RISE, there's no hard deadline for accommodations. You just want to make certain that you were entering those accommodations in Adam prior to the student starting the assessment, with the exception of students who need Braille paper or large print paper. That is what's considered an additional order, and you will find that guidance in the test administration manual. Pearson does ask for at least 2 weeks notice so that they can put those materials together and ensure a timely delivery of materials. When you are ordering Braille, it's going to have you specify exactly which Braille code the student uses. It's going to vary from student to student. You're going to want to make certain that you are checking with the student's IEP team, probably their teacher for the visually impaired, so you don't order the wrong Braille materials, because if you do, the student will not be able to understand them. If you ever do run into an emergency or a last minute situation where you forgot to place an order, please reach out to me. We have overnighted materials before. That does put some stress and unnecessary tension for everybody involved, though, at the LEA. But we can do that in emergency situations. And I would much rather you reach out to me and let's get that overnighted versus just trying to like cover up that mistake at all. So, but 2 weeks is the priority in the request. Next slide.
All right, ACT. Next slide. For ACT, our first test event does open March 10th. If you weren't able to attend the trainings or if you'd like a refresher on any of the topics, I've included their recordings here, but you can also find them on our YouTube channel. I would also encourage you to take time to peruse the resources provided on the ACT Now resources site, as it pretty much has everything that you need. On that site, each of those steps in the screenshot that's here below, the pre-administration, test administration, and post-administration, each of those is a drop down and it has a wealth of information for you. Some of it links to web content. Some of them are short snippet videos of like a 2-minute explanation on how to do something, but they're all great resources to assist you with ACT administration. But if at any time you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me regarding administration or Maureen with rostering. If you're still missing students, we're still getting emails about students not showing up for schools. So reach out to us with those inquiries and also Jessica with accommodations.
Okay, so friendly reminder for ACT. ACT does have very strict guidelines for submitting accommodation requests. As I mentioned earlier this year, ACT updated its deadline. Previously, they had one deadline that was the same deadline no matter what window you were testing in. However, a lot of states were really pushing ACT to have some more flexibility with that, and they listened. So this year, they had 3 different deadlines that correlate to the test event that your LEA has chosen. The first 2 deadlines for submitting accommodations have passed, but window 3, if you are testing in that last accommodation or that last ACT window, their deadline for submitting accommodations is coming up. If you did miss a deadline for window 1 or 2 for any student, the recommendation for ACT is to put that student in the next testing window, which now would just be window 3. So if there's anybody out there who forgot to place a couple of students, you still have this opportunity to put them in window 3. Every year we get a few phone calls of people who missed it. And the next default recommendation from USBE is that you at the LEA need to set up and pay for the student to participate in a Saturday national administration for the ACT. And that's really a strongly encouraged guidance in order if the student has an IEP or a 504 plan, so that you are providing FAPE to that student. But you still have window 3 as the opportunity. But if you're window 3 and you miss that, then you're going to have that hard conversation with parents and let them know kiddo is going to be testing in a national test day, not with their peers. And sometimes that's not a fun conversation to have. With ACT accommodations, when you're entering those in the TAA system, please remember to check the decision notifications, which lets you know if the student was approved or denied an accommodation. If a student was denied an accommodation and you think that is a concerning decision, investigate it. If you really think it should have been approved, please reach out to me. And we have seen some errors from ACT's accessibility team in the past, and we are happy to advocate on your behalf. And usually, if you're right and your hunch is right, ACT has reversed their decision and applied that accommodation to the student. I mean, it's humans looking at it, so there's human errors. And if there's a mistake, we will correct it. But that's up to you to check those decision notifications and follow up with them. Don't just take a rejection as valid. I would double check that and make certain it doesn't raise any questions at your LEA. That's it.
Jessica, there's a question.
Okay, so for students who have a new plan, there's guidance on the ACT Now website. There are very few exceptions to the initial window. One of the exceptions is for students who have a new plan. So Ashley, if you go to the ACT website, you will see that. It's called qualified exceptions to the deadline. and that student would meet that exception. So you can fill out that form. If you can email me if you don't see it, but it's right there under the accommodation resources on the ACT page.
Excellent. Well, we finished just a few minutes early. If there are other questions, we can stay on for a few minutes and respond to any of these questions. Look like we have another question about accommodation, so I'll let Jessica read that and then respond. Looks like we have a couple of questions coming in. And thank you again for joining us. So I'll pause and let Jessica respond to these questions.
Mary, I'm not sure about the school transfers. I would hope so, and in which case the student would have a PIN number and that should transfer. Maureen might have more information on that with rostering.
You can transfer students in ACT now. So I would try that first. First, get those students transferred over to you in ACT now, and their pins should transfer with them. And if that doesn't happen, I would call the ACT help desk.
Okay, and so Brianna, I love that question about extended time. My hunch would be that the student, of course, I know you've been around and probably did not let this happen, but sometimes if the accommodation was not outlined on their IEP plan, if ACT didn't see the evidence of that accommodation marks that they were receiving it, that would be the number one reason for denial. If the plan you submitted did have extended time, then please reach out to me, because that we have seen that happen before with a wave of kiddos, and ACT looked into it and they realized that it was a mistake. So will you email me and you can send me just the SSIDs of those students, and I can reach out to ACT to look into that. Now, if it was not on the plan and you see it was not on the plan, there's nothing ACT is going to do about it. That was a mistake on your behalf. But
And I would add, Jessica, not just not on the plan, but in the instructional side too. So it can't just be marked for assessment. Remember, they look for that alignment.
They're not that detailed anymore. As long as it's there somewhere, it just needs to be indicated at some point. They're not necessarily looking for both anymore. But so I would wonder that could have been a mistake on your behalf. It wasn't on the plan. But we'll have to look into that. In RISE, when you turn the scribe function, there's section called other accommodations and scribe under the subjects. Christina, are you talking about in Tide? There is a second section called that doesn't seem to be right. There's scribe in the other. I think the other was just like handheld calculator. In no scribe would you wouldn't have the ability to turn it on. I think for the purpose of this, I'll double check when we get off. I don't want to like log in and keep everybody waiting right now. I just don't think that that's on there, but I'll double check. And if it was, it wouldn't be something that you would have the ability to click. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking wrong. Specify a circle. So Brianna, so that is a good question too. It's kind of tricky. If the IEP team is okay with things, I would definitely document that, because you'll want that to CYA yourself. But if you say there was a parent, you just want to have parent communication. If there was if the student was supposed to have double time, and you at the LEA made a mistake and did not actually have that outlined and ACT denied it, then that kind of onus is on you. And so what you would want to do is, yeah, have that conversation with parents and say, hey, we only got approved for 1.5 time. Do you feel comfortable with this? If they didn't and there was hesitation, you could extend the offer to the parent. We can set the student up for national testing or move them to that test window 3 at this point. You know, you still have a week to do that. And that would be a way that you could extend the offer to the parent in order to adhere to FAPE. So it's a case by case basis, and it's an IEP team decision. But yeah, if you communicate that with each family and the student, and they're like, yeah, 1.5 times would be sufficient, then I would just make a note of that somewhere in the school records that student was approved for ACT 1.5 times. IEP team was in agreement, sign and date it. Just keep that in the student file. Okay, I can't pull that up right now, Christine. Oh, wait, let's see. Scribe. Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, you don't need to worry about that, Christine.
So they don't need to mark that additional drop down as yes on the scribe. If they select
No,
scribe initially, that should be sufficient.
no, I am the only one who touches those accommodations.
So nobody touches those but Jessica. Got it. All right. Well, thank you for those additional questions. Appreciate the chance to be able to interact with you all today. Thank you for the feedback and for the ideas for enhancements or things we can look at to improve the testing situations for all of you. If you continue to have questions, we can hang out for a minute or two longer, and always reach out with email or phone calls. We're happy to talk through any questions that you have. Again, thank you to the team here. I appreciate the team here at USBE so much. They are responsive and knowledgeable and quick to help. So I appreciate them and their work, and that they support all of you and me with each day. So thank you all, and thank you, USBE team. We'll hang out for a minute if there's other questions, and if not, we'll see you at the next meeting.
Okay, I did have a question that was just privately messaged me, and it was surrounding Bluetooth to connect a student's hearing aids to the RISE or Utah Aspire Plus assessment. So this is another frequently asked question, and I've asked the Cambium vendor to add this information into our manuals because it does get asked many times every testing year. And so the guidance from Cambium is to have the student use a training test with their Bluetooth hearing aids. It's not anything that you need to state request. I have never known there to be any interference with the Bluetooth hearing aids within the secure browser of the RISE training test. So it's not something that you need a special request at the state. There should be no interference. That's the guidance I've given everybody who's asked me that, and that's directly from our vendor. And I've never heard a report of any concerns. So that's just really like a hearing enhancement, and we're not concerned about that. And the only concern with the Bluetooth, would even be, I mean, we would never tell a kid who has a hearing impairment they can't use that. It's just that, yeah, sometimes, yeah, the Bluetooth would interfere, and according to Cambium, it does not interfere with that secure testing environment. So those are things that you're free to use.
Great. Well, thank you all. If there's no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and log off. We appreciate it. Thanks for your time this month.